Oh, Father, we honor the heart of your Son, broken by men's cruelty, yet symbol of love and of love's triumph. Model too of all that man is called to be. Teach us to see Christ in the lives we touch, and to offer him living worship by love-filled service to our brothers and sisters through Christ our Lord. I said it before, old men tend to talk about the past, and I did more than my share of it during these conversations. But let me say too that old men get the biggest lift when they find out that they can still reach out and touch young people's minds and hearts. We were on our way to lunch today when two young confreres went out of their way to tell me about the lift they got from these recent conversations. And just a few minutes ago, another young confrere, notice I stress young, he spoke so beautifully about these things, and let me say, all of them together made my day. It is the biggest reward that anyone could get. Because what greater comfort can we old soldiers have than to know that young men are ready to take up Don Bosco's ideals with courage and enthusiasm. Praise the Lord. Hallelujah. Please do not forget the heart of Jesus today, the heart of our crucified Lord. Why not make the stations of the cross out there? They are an invitation to us to walk with him the way to Calvary. And tonight, after night prayers, we will have that open forum about which we spoke and which I thought last week turned out to be rather interesting and even exciting. So I'll be open to any question that you might wish to ask on any point we dealt with. But please, not just I. There should be input from other sources too. So let's do it that way. Last Sunday we placed in the hands of Our Lady the retreat, and we will end it under her smiling protection tomorrow. We will take her with us to our Eucharistic assembly and feel as the disciples must have felt when suddenly in the cenacle before Pentecost, Christ's mother became their mother. With her we will sing joyfully from the heart the Magnificat of our thanksgiving because he has done great things for us. And will then take her to our hearts and to our homes. Cheerfulness, we said this morning, is a byproduct of the Salesian family spirit, a sort of trademark in our society. It was given full play in the early days of the congregation. I told you, right under the nose of Don Bosco, Don Rua, Don Albert, and the rest of them. And the result were delightful episodes. One could go on and recount a great many of them. We told 2 or 3 of such episodes, but there is one this morning I bypassed, but it's too beautiful to pass. It has as its protagonist Blessed Michael Rua himself and Don Ubaldi, the future distinguished professor of patristic theology at the Catholic University of Milan, known in his younger years as the oratory's #1 joker. You remember him, I am sure, the young gaucho cleric at the Vatican. Everybody at the mother house knew that Don Rua, even as rector major, frequently enough, around 10 o'clock in the evening, would make the rounds of the oratory, rosary in hand, to encourage all to remember that after night prayers the place to be in was one's room. He had a ritual all his own. Caro figliolo, he would say to the delinquent confrere, my son, I am just about to begin to say the rosary. Join me. We will say it for your intention. Don Ubaldi, who among other things excelled on the stage for his acting ability, imitating Don Rua's gait, the collar of his topcoat way up to his face, had more than once trapped unhappy confreres in the dark. And the porticos at the oratory, those arcades, could be dark, particularly on foggy nights, and actually had gotten them to recite part of the rosary before revealing his identity for a good laugh. In other words, he was impersonating Don Rua. Once, on a particularly dark and foggy night, Don Ubaldi, noticing a confrere roaming about, approached him, and in a perfect imitation of Don Rua, Vieni, figliolo, come, my son, we will say the rosary for you. Suddenly, after a few Hail Marys, Don Ubaldi, with a start, realized that the confrere walking alongside him and reciting the rosary so devoutly was none other than Don Rua himself. He wanted to excuse himself, but thought it would be better to get done with the rosary first. Before he even had a chance to speak, Don Rua said very calmly and matter-of-factly, Caro figliolo, we have said a rosary for my intention, now we say one for you. Years later, blessed Don Rua would himself tell the story, embellishing it always with new details. And so add also this little gem to your collection of Salesian fiorettes. In 1886, the novices in France were notified by Don Rua that Don Bosco would visit them on his way back from Paris to Turin. And that would be, Don Rua wrote, within a month or so. Encouraged by the novice master, Father Pinelli, they wrote a letter to Don Rua. We want Don Bosco to be really pleased with us, the novices wrote. So kindly let us know, Don Rua, how he would like to find us. We will do our best to be just so. Don Rua replied, and I still remember the letter that Father Pinelli kept. Don Rua replied, and notice that letter Don Rua used was actually a piece of paper which he had evidently cut from some other used up paper to show you how Don Rua was very particular about poverty. Just a tiny little piece of paper. Don Rua replied, Don Bosco will be more than pleased if he will find you to be a cheerful lad, if he sees that you really care for one another, as brothers should. And finally, if he will find you determined to become saints and do great things for souls. In one of his last good nights at the oratory, Don Aldera Don Bosco's second successor, summed up what would seem best to define that elusive concept we call Salesian spirit. Now, you know we are speaking about Salesian spirit today. He summed it up in these words. Do you want to know if you have the genuine spirit of Don Bosco? Examine yourself frequently by asking yourself these questions. 1. Do I strive to live in the presence of God? 2. Am I habitually serene and cheerful, and 2, kind and cordial with all? 3. Do I willingly face sacrifice for the good of souls? To a nephew, Don Rinaldi wrote, you ask me what you must do to be a Salesian after Don Bosco's heart. You will be such if you seek only God in all you do, if you don't shy from work, if you are temperate, cheerful, tolerant of others, kind and patient with all. To the Newton novices, Father Pittini, having taken the place of Father Binelli, who had died, said in a conference, you have cast your lot with the Lord for just one purpose, to bring souls to him with the methods and the spirit of Don Bosco. Boundless trust in God, hard work, infinite kindness, joy, optimism are all part of that spirit. Now you wonder, why all these quotes? First, they specifically refer to that difficult-to-catch concept which we call Salesian spirit. We talk so much about it, but we never seem to be able to put our finger on it. Second, because these quotations come from authoritative exponents of the Salesian life, their names touch it. And third, because I mean to draw your attention to the 3 prevailing elements in each of these quotations. They are that God's presence must be a reality in our life. 1. 2. A total dedication to the kingdom. And 3. Our specific Salesian way, which is a way of love, kindness, and cheerfulness. I'm sure that you are very quick to note that this is the best of the gospel, pure and simple. However, Don Bosco put it into a new context in the church, a context rich and joyous and immensely fruitful, that has blazed a new trail in the Church of God, not unlike the trail opened by St. Benedict, St. Francis of Assisi, and St. Ignatius of Loyola. Now this again may sound like Salesian rhetoric or triumphalism. I think I can prove to you that it is not rhetoric. And were it to be, it is not Salesian rhetoric, as you will note from whom it came. But first, why do I stress the point that Don Bosco's spirit and mission must be seen as pure and simple gospel? Truthfully, I feel that probably some of you, at the end of this retreat, will accuse me of having given you a lot of Don Bosco, but very little, precious little gospel. Fortunately, I have a pope on my side, Pius XI, who canonized Don Bosco on Easter Sunday, 1934. I think Father John Romano, Father Borgatello were present with me that day. In his masterful homily at the canonization ceremony, He stated that the spirit and mission of Don Bosco identified with the spirit and mission of the gospel, indeed with Christ himself. If in the memoirs, I believe in the last volume, you have a chance to read that magnificent homily, note that it was Easter Sunday. For the first time in the history of the church, a saint, a servant of God, was canonized on Easter Sunday. And Pope Pius XI, when he decided himself that it would be Easter Sunday, was criticized by some in the Vatican. He was not one to stand any criticism. And he said it plainly, I have a reason for it. And his idea was to match the mission of Christ and the mission of Don Bosco, the redemptive mission of Christ on its triumphal day of Easter within the mission of Don Bosco. Nor is it rhetoric, Salesian rhetoric, equating the contribution Don Bosco made to the church to the contribution made by Benedict, Francis of Assisi, or Ignatius of Loyola. One of my life's most rewarding experiences was only a few months ago, when, being part of the last phase, the final phase of Don Rinaldi's beatification process, all persons who had known him, who had contacts with him, were urgently requested to attend the final meeting of the Apostolic Tribunal. We should have gone to Rome, but the delegates from Rome came to Turin. This was almost a month-long performance. So this being the final tribunal point where his life would be completely and finally investigated. And let me tell you, I never thought that a tribunal for the beatification of a servant of God was anything like I found out it was. It was actually a tribunal with a presiding judge, prosecutor, the devil's advocate, so-called, defense lawyers, and witnesses. It is unbelievable how careful the church is in assessing the presumed sanctity of its members who are candidates for the honor of the altar. The presiding judge was a Jesuit, the prosecutor a Dominican, shades of Torquemada, with a Capuchin, a Servite, and a Passionist as lawyers. No Salesians, of course, were involved, except the witnesses. There were several sittings at the Chancery office of Turin. And the witnesses, we, the witnesses, were drilled mercilessly on every statement we made. Like all worthwhile events in the church, this one too ended with a good dinner at the Mother House. It was there that I wished I could have taped the conversation of those who were present. What came through was the immense admiration on the part of the members of the tribunal, Jesuit, Dominican, Capuchin, Servite, and Passionist, for what the Dominican called the remarkably rich and prolific fountain of holiness Don Bosco had opened up in the church. Number-wise, in terms of canonized and canonizable Salesians, note at the Dominican, there is not the like of it in the entire history of religious order and congregations in the church. This thought was also expressed by Cardinal Ballestrero, the Archbishop of Turin, a few days later, when at a ceremony at which the proceedings of the tribunal, collected and printed in several large volumes, were officially sealed and entrusted to a courier for delivery at the Vatican. Said Cardinal Balestrero, "It looks to me as if the Salesians have made it a habit to beatify and canonize all, or nearly all, the successors of Don Bosco. How long can we allow this to go on?" Now, again, plainly, this is not Salesian rhetoric. Now, these men who were part of the tribunal were outstanding people, theologians and so forth, men well read in the history of the church and in geography. So, my dear confreres, let's make it clear, we are not exaggerating. When we are saying with old Tobias, remember the Bible, Filii sanctorum sumus, we are truly children of saints. If anything, again, that strange feeling which I have, and that I have expressed already, that all too often we tend to hold back on the esteem we ought to have for things Salesian, perhaps due to an unjustifiable inferiority complex, unjustifiable completely, that brings us to underestimate what outsiders admire and praise. You will think me harsh, but I'll say it anyway. Is it not possible that this lack of optimism, this lack of enthusiasm, may not be due to our own poor personal performance? It may well come to that. When in 1927, Father Pittini arrived from Argentina to take over as provincial at New Rochelle, he was very quick to note that tendency of self-diminishment in many of the confreres. Note that in those days we probably had reason to feel inferior. We just had 2 or 3 schools, and maybe 3 parishes in the whole province, and a meager handful of struggling Salesians, most of us foreign born. How well I remember Father Pittini's first good night. "We must have faith in Don Bosco," he said. "He will make his way in this great country. We need only have his spirit and ideals." And please, he had lots of optimism and enthusiasm. Is it not possible that we can use some of that optimism and enthusiasm, which is really a part of our Salesian spirit? I must tell you about the official welcome Father Pittini got when he arrived at the provincial house. He spoke English slowly, choosing his words carefully, with a mixture of Spanish and British accent, since he had learned English from a British-born Salesian in Argentina or in Uruguay. His problem was, he used to say, to understand this very strange American English, he used to say. The welcome address to the new provincial was given by Father Costanzo, who was then the 27-year-old director at our New Rochelle school, and is now a vigorous 82 in San Francisco. Quite a sketch, that man. You should have known him when he was young. He was then, and probably still is now, the most unpredictable speaker I ever met. The things that would come out from his mouth were probably much more hilarious than he meant them to be. It was a strange thing. He never could start talking without strange things pouring from the fullness of his heart. In the course of his address, welcoming the new provincial, Father Costanzo described the difficult task the provincial has. He said, the provincial's job includes collecting all the unpleasant things around the province. In other words, and he turned to Father Pittini, remember, Father, and from now on, among other things, you are also a garbage collector. Now, this nearly brought down the house. The kids of the school were present too. And you can just imagine. The fact is that the future Archbishop, did not understand the meaning of the word garbage. So he turned to one of the provincial councillors seated next to him and said, whatever Father said must have been rather interesting and funny. He was told later, and he had a good laugh too. But the heart of Father Pittini. We were 4 young clerics, all of us foreign-born, teaching 4 to 5 hours a day and attending Fordham University at night. Our New Rochelle school was then a boarding school with over 200 youngsters, senior high school. And let me tell you that those kids from Brooklyn and the Bronx, angels were not, positively not. And Father Pittini never lost sight of us young clerics. I shall never forget the first Christmas night in that big empty school with no family to go to. One afternoon during the holidays, he came looking for us. He found me in the cell. Remember the cell, the little place in the dormitory, the cubbyhole, catching up on my work or whatever. I said, Peter, is there anything? Oh, no, the cook was not available, was not in the house. Peter, is there anything in the rule that says that the provincial cannot or must not take 4 nice clerics for a nice dinner in a nice restaurant? I said, certainly not, Father. Then what are you waiting for? Go tell the others. Be ready by 6 o'clock. I bet I know what you're thinking now. Why don't we have superiors like that anymore? We should rather ask ourselves, why don't we all try to be Salesians like Father Pittini? That's the real question. The extraordinary thing about being a Salesian, after Don Bosco's heart, is that it is there happiness and serenity lie for us. In modern parlance, it is the only way in which we can be and feel fulfilled. I like to say it again. The happy, genuinely happy confrere in my long life in the society has invariably been a man who was every inch a Salesian. Now, might we not see in the malaise, in the frustrations that trouble us at times, individually, personally, and even our communities, the symptoms that we do not have our heart in our vocation? This is just a thought. Don't take it amiss. Happiness and serenity the Salesians who were close to Don Bosco had in abundance. At least the ones I knew. Some of us knew. Father Gianni Magno, Father Borgatello. Don Francesio, Don Barberis, Cardinal Caliero, Don Albera, Don Rinaldi, Don Piscetta, Don Fasce, Don Amassi, Don Trione, Bishop Versilia, Father Alfonso, and any number of others. Don Amassi, the one of the snuff, had a great hold on us boys, possibly because we knew him best of all. His pockets were all forever filled with hard candy, chestnuts, dry figs, dates, oranges, or whatever. They were meant for his festive oratory boys because he would often be with them. but we students would often be the beneficiaries too. We loved his sparkling jokes and pleasant stories. He was our confessor too, snuffing away his strong stuff even while in the confessional. And I remember that some of us used to start sneezing the moment we knelt in front of him, because the stuff was so powerful. Well, weekly confession in those days was understood. It had to be. And he did not like it. You don't have to come every week for things like that, he would tell us. Once a month is enough. One good confession, well prepared, is worth 50 hurried ones. You tell me you are lazy and don't do your work right. Suppose you try hard for 1 month and then you come back and tell me if you did any better. Now go, you don't need absolution. And this brings us to a very interesting episode. He was pleasant, but he could also be impatient. My sister, who was a Salesian nun, had a part in this episode and vouches for its truth. During the early fall, September, one year, Donna Mossi substituted for the chaplain at the Salesian novitiate of the sisters at Nizza Monferrato near Asti. It was grape-picking time, and the 80 or 90 novices, think in those days, did most of the picking in the extensive vineyards of the novitiate property, that those luscious grapes from which the famous Asti Spumante comes. On one occasion, being Friday, Mother Mistress told the novices to offer up a little penance and keep from eating any grapes while picking them. But how can you pick muscatel grapes and not eat them? So most of those girls of those novices did. On the following morning, during meditation, feeling uneasy about going to communion after such a monstrous breach of obedience, some of them quietly left their place and went over to the confessional in back of the chapel, where Donna Mossi was saying his breviary and snuffing away. Said my sister, I was the first one to get into the confessional. I picked grapes, Father, and I ate some of them. Well, now, why pick grapes if you do not eat them? Mother Mistress told us not to. You broke no commandment of God or of the church. Anything else? No, Father. You don't need absolution. Go to communion, young lady. God bless you. More novices were coming up. And he could see them from the confessional through the little curtain in front of him. And the procession was steadily moving on until he lost his patience altogether. This is historical, notice this. His patience could not take, his impatience could not take it anymore. He left the confessional, and with a tone of impatience in his voice, now you young ladies, he told them, if all you did is eat grapes, you don't need to come to confession. Go to communion. And he added, and eat all the grapes you want. That was meant for Mother Mistress. Dear Donna Mossi, he lay dying at the oratory, well on in his 80s, and never for a moment lost his marvelous serenity and cheerfulness. Don Augusto, the director, said to him the day before he died, it's great to see you in such a fine spirit. Why not? He replied. And quoting the scriptures, as was his habit, Scio cui credidi, I know in whom I have placed my trust, pointed to heaven. And then he added, listen, when you write my mortuary letter, the obituary letter, which was then sent to all the houses in the world, write it in a cheerful vein. Well, he made sure that the rector did too. At the end, as his end approached, he was dying. The priest who was guiding the prayers of the night with several confessors on the bed, whether because he thought Donna Mossi had died or through an oversight, slipped up and went right on with the sub venite, which in the ritual is the prayer the priest is directed to offer the moment the person expires. Donna Mossi stirred, opened his eyes and whispered, "What's the hurry? I'm not yet dead." It was a detail too precious to keep out of the obituary letter, and so the confreres throughout the world did have a pleasant laugh the way Donna Mossi had wanted. We are at the last of the Fiorettis. We have seen how 4 very prestigious exponents of the Salesian life define for us the Salesian spirit. Let's come to some practical conclusions. First of all, let's be grateful we are Salesians. Remember Father Binelli's prayer, "I adore you, O my God, and I love you with my whole heart. I thank you for having created me, called me into your church, and to the religious and Salesian life." And let's behave as Salesians. St. Jerome, barely 20 and living in dissolute Rome, was to his own admission a Christian more in name than in fact. His heart was set on becoming a great scholar, and his literary idol was Cicero. He imitated the style of Cicero, as he himself confesses in one of his letters, and even avoided reading the scriptures, fearing the barbarous Latin of the Bible might contaminate his own classical Latin. He had a dream one night. He saw Jesus coming toward him, but strangely enough, though the Lord looked at Jerome, went right past him. So Jerome went up to him. "Master," he said, "don't you know me? I am Jerome, a Christian." Jesus replied in the dream, of course, "Jerome, you are indeed, but not a Christian. You are a follower of Cicero. Non Christianus sed Ciceronianus." Well, may it not be said of us, none of us, you are a very fine teacher. You are an efficient principal. You are a wonderful preacher. But you are not a Salesian. So let's listen again to what Don Rua, Don Albera, Don Rinaldi, and Father Pittini have to say about this. Don Rua, you are not a Salesian if you are not usually cheerful, cordial with people, and willing to go out of your way for them. You are not a Salesian if you do not make an earnest effort to grow daily closer to God. Don Albera, you are not a Salesian if you are not habitually united with God, if you are not at peace with yourself and the people who you live with, ready to sacrifice yourself for them. Don Rinaldi, you are not a Salesian if in what you do you seek to please yourself or others rather than God. You are not if you shy from work, if you are not temperate, cheerful, tolerant of others, kind and patient with all. Archbishop Pittini, you are not a Salesian if you don't give all of yourself to your charges for the Lord's sake. If what you do for them, you do not do it with love, kindness, and enthusiasm. Mamma mia, you will say, not one of us is a Salesian at this point. Not so. What does count is that we never stop trying to be good Salesians. St. Augustine says, that we eventually become what we earnestly want to be. In fact, he adds, et idiam sumus quod fieri volumus. We are already what we aim to become. But we have to leave to Don Bosco the final word. And I do so because one of you asked me to read it again, although we did at the homily on the day of Don Bosco. Don Bosco, what is the Salesian spirit? And Don Bosco, when I chose St. Francis de Sales as my own and your model, I did so because I felt that of all the saints, the heart of Francis was most like the heart of Jesus. I felt I could hardly have made a better choice for myself and for you, my Salesians. It has been said that to this I added something of my own. Truly I myself am at a loss to say what it is, since all I did was let myself be led by the Lord's inspiration and the needs of the moment. In the end, what counts is the heart, which means that a Salesian must give himself completely, unreservedly, as Jesus did, and do so with a loving kindness and utmost respect for all. Remembering always that only through suffering are souls led to Christ, and that a life of ease and comfort spares death for our society. Nor should we wait for people to come to us. We must reach out to them, particularly the youngsters in need. One more thing. We must not limit the field of our action, since it is as vast as the church, as vast as the world. And to our action, we must bring our own special charisma, special in the Salesian way, a Salesian sense, an approach at once creative, genial, joyous, and enthusiastic. This is the Salesian spirit. This is what the Salesian spirit is all about. Well, we are at the conclusion practically of our retreat, except for tomorrow mornings, and we can only expect the retreat suddenly to transform us. That cannot be. The truth is that we will continue to be vessels of clay, bearing each one of us the gift of God. Like the tireless sower, the Lord during these days scattered in the field of our hearts the seeds of his grace and love. We know he does not abandon his field, but what must we do on our part? May I suggest two things. Let's be convinced, first of all, as we are convinced of a few things in our life, that we are personally loved by Christ. And act on this conviction. This can revolutionize our life. It is again St. Augustine who says, to know I am loved by the God I love is life's greatest joy and greatest driving force. Summum vitae gaudium et maxima vis. Nothing in life is ever too difficult, nothing impossible, if in all we do we are motivated, driven, the words of Paul, St. Paul, compulsi by the love which is in Christ Jesus our Lord. Second, remind ourselves frequently that our religious and Salesian vocation, grafted on the saving grace of our baptism, is the crowning gift of Christ's personal love for you and for me. Can we possibly be half-hearted in our religious and Salesian life if we carry this conviction in our hearts? Difficulties, frustrations, relapses too, we will certainly continue to face. but strong in the conviction that Jesus loves us, we will have but one answer when in the more quiet and prayer-filled moments of our busy life, he will ask us, Peter, Henry, Joseph, Dominic, Vincent, do you love me? Master, we will say, you know everything. You know that I